Imagine a student who spends 5 years memorizing grammar rules. He knows the difference between past perfect, present perfect, and future perfect. He can score 95 out of 100 on grammar tests, but when a tourist asks him a simple question in English, he freezes, not because he lacks knowledge, but because he cannot use it. Now imagine another student. She rarely studies grammar books. She listens to English every day, watches videos, speaks with people, and makes lots of mistakes. A year later, she speaks confidently. Here's the big question. If grammar is supposed to help us speak English, why does the person who memorizes the most grammar often struggle the most? And even more surprising, what if the way most people learn grammar is actually slowing down their progress? Stay with us because later in this episode, I'll share a fascinating story about a famous language learner who completely changed the way people think about learning languages. And what he discovered might change the way you learn English forever. Welcome to the Listening English podcast. I'm your host, and today we are exploring a topic that confuses millions of English learners around the world: why grammar memorization fails.
That's such an interesting topic. Honestly, I think many listeners will relate to this, because I definitely do. I remember spending hours memorizing grammar rules. I filled notebooks with tenses, sentence structures, and exceptions. But when it was time to speak English, I felt nervous and couldn't form sentences quickly. Have you ever felt that way?
That's exactly what happens to many learners, Rose. They think learning English is like collecting grammar rules, so they memorize rule after rule, chapter after chapter. But language isn't a museum where you collect information. Language is a skill, and skills don't grow through memorization alone.
That's interesting. So you're saying that grammar itself isn't the problem?
Exactly. Grammar is important. The real problem is believing that memorizing grammar automatically creates speaking ability. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. You could memorize every rule about balance, speed, and movement. You could read 10 books about cycling, but until you actually get on the bicycle, wobble a little, and practice riding, you won't become a cyclist.
That makes so much sense. Yet many English learners spend years reading about English instead of actually using English.
And that's where today's conversation gets exciting, because in the next section, we are going to uncover the hidden psychological reason why grammar memorization feels productive, even when it often doesn't improve speaking. We will also reveal one mistake that intelligent learners make again and again without realizing it.
And honestly, I can't wait to hear that, because I think a lot of people, including me, have probably made that mistake.
Most likely. So if you've ever wondered why your English knowledge seems much bigger than your English speaking ability, keep listening. The answer may surprise you.
Earlier, you mentioned a psychological reason why grammar memorization feels productive. I'm really curious about that. What is it?
Great question. Let's start with something most listeners have experienced. Imagine you open a grammar book and study the present perfect tense. After 20 minutes, you feel good. You learned a new rule. You completed an exercise. You got most answers correct. It feels like progress.
Yes, that's exactly how it feels. Sometimes I finish a grammar chapter and think, wow, my English is improving.
And that's where the trap begins. Psychologists call this the illusion of competence. Your brain mistakes recognition for mastery. Because you understand the rule while reading it, your brain assumes you can use it in real life.
But understanding something isn't the same as using it.
Exactly. Let me tell you a short story. Young man wanted to learn swimming. He bought books about swimming. He watched videos about swimming techniques. He memorized every swimming rule. Months later, he still couldn't swim.
Because he never entered the water.
Right. Language works the same way. Grammar books explain the water. Speaking puts you in the water.
That's such a powerful example. So many learners are standing beside the pool, studying swimming, but never swimming.
Exactly. And here's something even more surprising. Children become fluent in their native language years before they can explain grammar rules.
That's true. Most children can't explain what a noun or verb is, but they speak naturally.
Because the human brain learns language primarily through exposure and use. Grammar is like a map. A map is useful, but a map is not the journey itself.
So if grammar memorization isn't enough, what should learners focus on instead?
Before I answer that, let's talk about another mistake that keeps learners stuck.
Another mistake?
Yes. Many learners believe they must speak perfectly before they start speaking regularly.
I think that's a huge problem. Sometimes people are afraid of making mistakes.
Absolutely. They think, once I learn all the grammar rules, then I'll start speaking. But here's the irony. The speaking practice they are avoiding is exactly what would help them improve.
That's almost like waiting to become fit before going to the gym.
Perfect analogy. Nobody says, I'll start exercising after I become strong. Strength comes from exercising. Fluency comes from speaking.
That reminds me of something that happened to a friend of mine. He studied English grammar for years. Then one day, he got a chance to talk with a tourist. He knew lots of grammar rules, but he struggled to keep the conversation going. Meanwhile, another person with weaker grammar spoke confidently because he had practiced speaking often.
That's a very common situation. Communication is not a grammar competition. Communication is about expressing ideas. If people understand you, communication is happening.
That takes a lot of pressure away.
It should. Of course, improving grammar is valuable. Better grammar makes communication clearer. But grammar should support communication, not replace it.
So, how do successful language learners use grammar?
That's the interesting part. The best learners don't memorize hundreds of rules first. They encounter grammar naturally through listening, reading, speaking, and conversations. Then they use grammar explanations to understand patterns they already notice.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you hear these sentences repeatedly. I have finished my work. She has arrived. They have left. After hearing these patterns many times, your brain starts recognizing them naturally. Then when you learn the present perfect rule, it suddenly makes sense because you've already seen it in action.
So grammar becomes an explanation, not the starting point.
Exactly. That's how many fluent speakers learn.
Earlier, you mentioned a famous language learner who changed the way people think about language learning. Is this the right moment to tell that story?
Almost. Because first, I want listeners to think about one question. Have you ever spent hours studying English and still felt nervous speaking? If the answer is yes, you're not alone. Millions of learners experience the same frustration. And the reason isn't that they are bad at languages. The reason is that they have been focusing too much on knowledge and not enough on skill building.
That's a really important distinction. Knowledge versus skill.
Exactly. Knowing about English and using English are two different abilities. And in the next part of our conversation, we are going to uncover some surprising truths about how the brain actually learns languages. We will also reveal the famous language learner I mentioned earlier and the unexpected lesson his experience teaches us.
Now you've made me curious. I definitely want to hear that story.
Trust me, the lesson behind that story could completely change the way many listeners approach English learning.
Earlier, you mentioned a famous language learner. I think listeners have been waiting for that story.
Yes, and it's worth the wait. The person I'm talking about is a linguist named Stephen Krashen. He spent years studying how people actually learn languages. And one of his biggest discoveries challenged what many schools had been doing for decades.
What did he discover?
He found that people acquire language best when they receive lots of understandable input.
What does that mean?
It means listening and reading things that are slightly above your current level, but still understandable. Instead of memorizing endless grammar rules, learners improve by being exposed to meaningful language repeatedly.
That's fascinating. So the brain learns patterns naturally?
Exactly. Think about music. If you hear a song 100 times, eventually you can sing parts of it without studying the lyrics. Your brain recognizes patterns automatically. Language works in a similar way.
That explains why some people learn English quickly through movies, podcasts, and conversations.
Yes, they are feeding their brains real language. And here's a surprising fact. Your brain is constantly searching for patterns even when you don't realize it.
Really?
Absolutely. Let me give you an example. Imagine you hear these sentences every day. Can I help you? Can I ask a question? Can I sit here? After enough exposure, you naturally understand how can I works. Nobody needs to stop and explain every grammar rule.
That's true. I never memorized every grammar rule in my native language either.
Exactly. And that's one of the hidden truths many learners overlook. We often expect English learning to be completely different from how humans naturally learn language.
That reminds me of another question. Why do people forget grammar rules so quickly after memorizing them?
Great question. The information is fragile. When grammar rules are disconnected from real conversations and real experiences, the brain treats them like temporary data. They stay for a test and then quietly disappear.
Like cramming before an exam.
Exactly. But when grammar is connected to stories, emotions, conversations, and experiences, it becomes much easier to remember.
So context matters.
More than most people realize. Let me tell you a quick story. Two students learned the word hungry. The first student memorized the dictionary definition. The second student remembered using the word after missing lunch and feeling hungry all afternoon. Months later, which student is more likely to remember the word?
Definitely the second student.
Exactly. Emotion strengthens memory. Experience strengthens memory. Real communication strengthens memory.
That's such an important insight. Learning isn't just information entering the brain. It's information connecting with experiences.
Beautifully said. And now let's talk about one of the biggest myths in English learning.
I'm ready.
The myth is this: if I make grammar mistakes, people will laugh at me.
I think many listeners have that fear. I certainly did.
Most learners do. But here's the reality. Most people care far more about understanding your message than counting your mistakes. Imagine someone says, "Yesterday I go market." The grammar isn't perfect, but do you understand the meaning?
Of course.
Communication succeeded. Now imagine someone knows every grammar rule but is too afraid to speak. Communication never even begins.
That's a powerful comparison.
Here's another surprising insight. Many advanced English speakers still make grammar mistakes occasionally.
Really?
Absolutely. Fluency does not mean perfection. Fluency means communicating naturally and effectively.
I think that idea alone could help so many learners feel less pressure.
It should, because perfection is a moving target. Communication is the real goal.
Earlier, you mentioned that grammar should support communication, not replace it. Now I finally understand what you meant.
Exactly. Grammar is the skeleton. Vocabulary is the building material, but communication is the living person.
That's a memorable image.
And before we move into practical advice, here's one final hidden truth. The fastest learners are not always the smartest learners. They are often the learners who are willing to be beginners. They make mistakes. They speak before they feel ready. They listen every day. They stay curious, and little by little, their English grows.
That's inspiring, because it means progress isn't reserved for talented people. It's available to anyone who practices consistently.
Exactly. And in the next part, we are going to discuss practical strategies that listeners can start using today. Strategies that help transform grammar knowledge into real speaking ability.
Perfect, because I think everyone listening wants to know what to do next.
And that's exactly where we are heading.
We have talked about why grammar memorization fails, the psychology behind it, and some surprising insights. But now comes the big question. What should listeners actually do instead?
Great question. Let's make this practical. If you're listening right now and wondering how to improve your English more effectively, I want to share 5 simple strategies. These strategies are not complicated. In fact, their simplicity is what makes them powerful.
I love practical advice. Let's start with the first one.
Strategy number 1, learn grammar through examples, not just rules.
What does that look like?
Instead of memorizing a rule like the present perfect is formed using have or has plus the past participle, learn it through real sentences. For example, I have finished my homework. She has visited London. They have already eaten. When you see many examples, your brain starts recognizing the pattern naturally.
So, examples first, rules second.
Exactly. Think of grammar rules as labels. The examples are what bring those labels to life.
That's much easier to remember.
Strategy number 2, listen more than you study.
That's interesting, because many learners do the opposite.
They do, but language is sound before it's grammar. Babies listen for thousands of hours before they start speaking. Now, I'm not saying adults should learn exactly like babies, but listening remains one of the most powerful tools for language acquisition.
So, podcasts, videos, conversations, and audiobooks can all help.
Absolutely. Every minute of listening is training your brain to recognize patterns, pronunciation, sentence structures, and natural expressions.
That's encouraging for our listeners, because they are already practicing listening right now.
Exactly. Every episode is helping build that language intuition.
What's the third strategy?
Strategy number 3, start speaking before you feel ready.
That's scary for a lot of people.
It is. But here's the truth. Most learners never feel completely ready. Confidence often comes after action, not before it.
That's such an important idea.
Imagine a musician waiting to feel confident before performing. or an athlete waiting to feel perfect before competing. Progress happens during practice, not before it.
So even if your English isn't perfect, speak anyway.
Exactly. Use short sentences, express simple ideas, make mistakes, learn, repeat.
That sounds much more realistic than waiting for perfection.
Because perfection is a destination that keeps moving farther away.
What's strategy number 4?
Strategy number 4, learn chunks, not isolated words.
Chunks.
Yes, instead of learning a single word, learn the phrase that usually comes with it. For example, don't just learn the word decision. Learn the phrase make a decision. Don't just learn the word mistake. Learn the phrase make a mistake.
Because that's how native speakers actually use language.
Exactly. Your brain stores useful language packages. And when you speak, those packages are easier to retrieve than individual words and grammar rules.
That seems like a huge shortcut.
It really is. Many fluent speakers rely heavily on chunks and patterns.
And what about the 5th strategy?
This one might be the most important. Strategy number 5, focus on communication, not perfection.
That's a theme we have returned to several times today.
Because it's the foundation of language learning. Every time you communicate successfully, you're making progress. Even if the grammar isn't perfect.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you're traveling and you say, "Where train station?" Is the grammar perfect?
No.
But will people probably understand what you mean?
Yes.
Communication happened. Of course, improving grammar is still valuable. Over time, you want your sentences to become more accurate. But don't let the pursuit of perfect grammar stop you from communicating today.
I think that's one of the biggest lessons from this entire episode.
I agree. Let me share a simple daily routine that listeners can try.
Great idea.
Spend 10 minutes listening to English. Spend 5 minutes reading something interesting. Learn 2 or 3 useful phrases. Then spend a few minutes speaking, even if it's just talking to yourself.
That sounds manageable.
Exactly. The goal isn't intensity. The goal is consistency.
Small daily actions.
Small daily actions create remarkable results over time.
You know, something feels different after today's discussion. Grammar no longer feels like a giant wall blocking progress. It feels more like a helpful tool.
That's exactly how it should feel. Grammar is your assistant. It is not your master.
I love that.
And in our final section, we are going to bring everything together. We will summarize the key lessons from today's conversation and leave listeners with one final thought that could completely change how they approach English learning from this day forward.
Don't go anywhere. The ending might be the most important part of all. We have covered so much today. We talked about why grammar memorization often fails, the psychology behind it, the hidden myths that hold learners back, and practical ways to learn English more effectively. If I had to summarize today's lesson in one sentence, it would be this: knowing grammar is not the same as using English.
That's a perfect summary. Grammar is valuable. It helps us communicate more clearly. It helps us understand how the language works. But grammar alone cannot create fluency. Fluency grows through listening, reading, speaking, making mistakes, and using English in real situations.
I think that's a message many learners need to hear, especially those who feel frustrated after studying for months or even years.
Absolutely. If you're one of those learners, I want you to remember something important. Your struggle does not mean you're bad at English. It doesn't mean you're not intelligent. It doesn't mean you'll never become fluent. It may simply mean you've been spending too much time learning about English and not enough time experiencing English.
That's such an encouraging perspective.
Think about today's opening story. One learner memorized grammar rules for years. Another learner spent time listening, speaking, and interacting with the language. The difference wasn't talent. The difference was practice.
And that's good news because practice is something everyone can control.
Exactly. You don't need a perfect accent. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need a special gift for languages. You simply need consistent exposure and consistent use.
Before we finish, I'd like to ask one final question. If a listener decides to change just one thing after today's episode, what should it be?
Great question. Tomorrow, spend less time memorizing rules and more time engaging with real English. Listen to a podcast, read a short article, watch a video, speak a few sentences, write a short paragraph, use the language. Because languages are not learned by watching from the sidelines. They are learned by stepping onto the field and playing the game.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And here's one final thought for everyone listening. Fluency is not built in giant leaps. It is built in small daily moments. One conversation, one podcast, one sentence, one mistake, one lesson at a time. Keep showing up, and one day you'll realize that the language that once felt impossible has become part of who you are.
What a wonderful message to end on. Thank you for listening to the Listening English podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you in the next podcast.
Keep learning
Keep listening.
and keep believing in your progress.
Until next time, take care and enjoy your English journey.
Bye, everyone.